good enough for government work. I know you've heard that phrase, but what does it really mean today compared to when it was originally used? The answers? Well, I was surprised, and I bet you will be surprised as well. Stephen Carter here, your host for History of Everyday Sayings. Thank you for joining us. Who is this show for? If you're a logophile, a philomath, or you simply love history tidbits you can use to impress friends and family, this show is for you. I was chatting with a family member about some work that they were doing. That family member commented, it's not 100%, but it's good enough for government work. Where in the world did that phrase come from? When I started to investigate the history of this phrase, I was surprised because over the years, that saying took on a very different meaning than when it was originally used. Let's first go to yourdictionary.com to the question, what is the origin of close enough for government work? Their first entry is, quote, government work is also a term for the manufacture of something on company time for personal use. For example, a custom trailer hitch made at a welding shop for the welder himself on the afternoon shift with no supervisors around is government work. And they note it is commonly heard in Ontario, Canada, and the Northeast U.S. Another source, and I'll spell this, Wiktionary, that tells us it originated in World War II. When something was good enough for government work, it meant it could pass most rigorous of standards. Over the years, it took on an iconic meaning that is now the primary sense, referring to poorly executed work. Going to the source grammarist.com, and by the way, all of these sources will be linked in the show notes, they tell us good enough for government work and close enough for government work are both American idioms to describe something that is merely adequate, something that meets the bare minimum standards, something that is subpar. Good enough for government work and close enough for government work have a surprising origin. Around the turn of the century, the terms were used to mean something of high quality or something that was the best of the best. And the source goes on to comment, these phrases may have persisted through World War II, though some believe this is the time when the meaning of the expressions began to change. By the 60s and 70s, good enough for government work and close enough for government work came to mean the exact opposite of their original definition. Going deeper into the history, in a Reddit post, we're told the phrase is Canadian in origin, starting in the 1900s, as in between 1900 and 1910, as close enough for government work. There it meant it was up to the standards the government used for purchasing, which usually meant higher quality than average. The phrase spread to the United States, where it was popularized during World War II, and the post claims either by Hollywood or American manufacturers, or perhaps both. In that case, the phrase represented not an inherent lack of quality, but that the bureaucrats they were working for could not evaluate the work effectively and often gave specifications that were, by the standards of the industry, strange or incompetent. This post goes on to claim the phrase became fully negative in the 1960s, perhaps a little earlier, but even then it still only referred to the interaction of the government and the private sector. The phrase exploded in popularity with the 1960s anti-government sentiment and became a symbol of dissatisfaction with the government at that time. And the person posting this in Reddit points to the origin as, quote, a history of the Canadian Parliament, claiming the phrase first appeared in the Parliamentary records on June the 8th, 1906, and the project of War, American Culture during World War II. In summary, this phrase started out as something different than the way we understand it today, so I would encourage you, when you think about the phrase good enough for government work, when applying this phrase to your own work, let's think about the original meaning of the term so that whatever work you're doing, whatever you're producing, is truly up to the best of standards. If you would like to contact me about this or any other episode, email me at cartermethod@gmail.com. If you're not following or you haven't subscribed to the History of Everyday Sayings, I encourage you to do that. When you do that, it guarantees you will never miss an episode. Until our next visit together, your host here, Stephen Carter, wishing you and your loved ones blessings in abundance.